Good morning or afternoon or wherever you are, but welcome to today's webinar, Customers on Slack, Get Work Done Your Way. I hope you're excited to learn a little bit more about how you can customize Slack very easily to get work done your way and to hear from some of our awesome customers and Slack champions and how they're using Slack to get work done. Before we get into that, I want to quickly introduce myself. Hello, everyone. My name is Christina Meng. I am a Customer Advocacy Programs Manager here at Slack, based in San Francisco, California. I've been at Slack for 6.5 years, so I've seen some things. I know a few things. So if you have questions, please feel free to ask them, and we'll be sure to get to them at the end. I don't want to steal the thunder of our awesome speakers, so just know that they're coming, and they're here and ready to tell you a little bit more about how they're using Slack and to answer your questions, and we'll get into some awesome introductions for them in just a little bit. Before I jump into today's topic, I wanted to quickly cover a few housekeeping items. Throughout today's webinar, we'll be answering your questions via chat. And then we'll also be selecting a few of these questions to answer live at the end. So feel free to submit your questions anytime, and someone from our team will definitely reply. For easy access, we've included some helpful links in the Resource Hub. And these resources will also be included with the email we send after the webinar, along with a copy of this presentation. So you don't need to take notes. You can just focus on the awesome content that our speakers have prepared. At the end of today's webinar, you'll receive a survey prompt, and we review everyone's responses, so please don't be shy. We love hearing your feedback, and it'll help us continue to deliver awesome content. So please let us know your feedback, what you liked, what you didn't like. We can take it. All right, so I'll give you a quick glance at what we're going to be chatting about today. First, we'll set some context around Slack and our workflow automation tool called Workflow Builder. We're going to teach you the ins and outs of building workflows, including how to connect your external tools so you can automate your routine tasks inside and outside of Slack. And then we're going to get into our awesome panel discussion, and then, of course, wrap up with some tips and tricks on how to get started, followed by our live Q&A. All right. Is everyone ready and excited? I'm going to pretend I can hear everyone going, yeah! So let's get into customizing Slack for you. So some of you might be new to Slack, so wanted to do a really quick recap for those of you who might be learning about Slack for the first time. So what is Slack? Slack is a channel-based messaging platform that replaces email inside your company. Channels provide you and your team with a really transparent and shared view into the work that's being done. And since everyone is in the channel and they have access to all of the same information, everyone can work in lockstep. When new members join a channel, it's also so much easier for them to catch up on the context they need to start working and to onboard to that project or whatever that channel is for, because all of the historical information is in that channel. All the conversations are there. And so when someone is onboarding into that channel, the questions really change from who's on this project, who's responsible for what, really to what are next steps and how can I hit the ground running. So that shift to using channels as a way to keep people informed and coordinated in and of itself can transform how you work. But you can make Slack even more powerful and serve your team's specific needs even better by integrating your outside tools and automating work in your Slack workspace. So if you're using channels right now, awesome, that is a really great place to start. But I truly believe that the true value of Slack lies in its ability to connect to all of the tools that you're using every day, as well as to automate a lot of the work that you're doing to save you time. And who doesn't love that? So you might be thinking to yourself, well, why would I want to do that? If you're using email, maybe email's working just fine for you. We want to take that beyond just fine. Over the past year especially, the world has really shifted. So we want to allow you to take control of your workday and take control of your time and attention by customizing your Slack workspace to reflect your unique way of working. So in Slack, you can choose when and how you get notified about updates, how you respond to approvals, how you stay connected to your teammates, and more. So with apps and customizable workflows, you're able to bring together the right teammates and tools all into a channel to move work forward. And that just unlocks greater speed, greater efficiency, and better connectivity with your teammates. And honestly, That sounds great all around, and hopefully that sounds good to you as well. So we're going to get into a little bit more about how to customize Slack right now. There are different ways of customizing Slack by connecting your tools, automating routine tasks, and building custom integrations. But we're going to really focus on connecting your tools and automating routine tasks. If you're looking to create something custom but don't have technical skills, which trust me, I do not, there's Workflow Builder, which is a tool in Slack that helps you automate routine tasks without writing a single line of code. Honestly, I might be the least technical person to ever exist. And if I can use Workflow Builder, I'm confident you can as well. You can set up a workflow to kick off after something specific happens in Slack. So for example, if a new person joins a channel or if someone reacts to a message with an emoji, we call this a trigger. Once a workflow is triggered, you can add custom logic about what happens next. So if your team is handling requests a lot, you can kick off a form or sending a message or syncing information with other tools. So you really don't have to worry about it. You might want to use Workflow Builder to onboard new employees or run daily stand-ups or to report status to the team or collect information from your teammates. Whatever it is, the possibilities are pretty much endless. And once the workflow is published, this is the best part. It just happens automatically behind the scenes. So you can kind of set it and forget it. So you and your team have more free time to focus on more important work. So you actually may have already seen apps working in Slack without realizing it. The Slack platform is responsible for bringing you handy shortcuts that you can see in channels. These include content previews, also known as unfurls, which you can see here on the screen. This Google Drive document has unfurled, and this happens when links get shared with your team. Now, this might seem like something small, but saving people a click through to content when they're in the flow of working really does help streamline your day. These seconds that are saved do add up, and eliminating that context switching really is helpful to help people stay focused and efficient throughout the day. You might have already seen apps show up through notifications and alerts that come into channel. So the example here is the Outlook calendar app. And that's a reminder that a meeting is about to start. And you're going to hear from some of our champions and speakers later about how that helps them stay focused and get to meetings on time. Some common cases for developers are things like receiving alerts when there's a new pull request from GitHub, or there's something broken in your CI pipeline. Customer support teams might even get a notification from PagerDuty right into Slack to let them know that there's an outage and they might need to hear from their customers. So again, the idea here is all of these notifications and alerts are getting pulled into Slack where you are working, so you're not having to leave the platform at all to address some of these notifications. Notifications aren't the end game for most of these services, though. They're alerting you because they need you to do something. So Slack takes that one step further and offers UI elements like buttons, drop-down menus, pop-over modals that allow you to interact directly with that app or integration within Slack without leaving that channel so you can respond right away. So you're not getting pushed out to a web UI. You're not having to log on to an internal system from your mobile phone. You're able to address these notifications all right within that Slack channel that you're in. So in this case here, the Outlook app is making it super easy for members of this channel just to click into that Join Zoom meeting button. And just like that, they're dropped right into the meeting. So preventing that break in people's concentration by having all of these notifications right in Slack saves seconds of time. And as I said before, these seconds do add up. If you think about seconds saved for every individual multiple times throughout the day, scaling that out to the organization, those are huge time savings, but also saves a lot of hassle as well. If you want to share a file, if I want to share a file with my team from Google Drive, I do this all the time. I always forget to update the permissions on the file. With Slack, it makes it easy because it'll remind me if I haven't done that. So how many of you think in your heads have received that, hey, can you give me access to that doc message? I think other than you're on mute is probably like the most frequent thing that we've heard over the past 2 years. But Slack makes it super easy to do this right within Slack. It'll tell me if I forgot to update these preferences and allows me to choose the options right within Slack so I don't have to leave my don't have to click out into a browser at all. And as you all probably know, on mobile, that is a huge pain. So this is probably one of my favorite features for the Google Drive integration by far. You can tell this happens to me a lot. So you and your team probably almost certainly have your own Google Drive scenario, quick tasks that you do frequently that would be so nice if they could just be done with a click, or workflows that could be less painful if they were automated. So we have a demo instance pulled up right here. In this case, it's a marketing team at Acme Inc., and they wanted to source more customer stories. It was easier to get people to submit suggestions, and when it's simpler and quicker to do so. So in this case, they built a form, a workflow submission form. And so it becomes super quick and easy for Acme employees to send in ideas in the format that marketing team prefers. So what's really great about Workflow Builder is it allows you to sort of templatize these requests and these suggestions that are coming in a way that's super easily digestible and streamlined across all of the suggestions that are coming in. So I could go on about Workflow Builder, but I think you've heard enough from me. I've been rambling on for 11 minutes now. I'm going to turn it over to some of our awesome speakers to introduce themselves. So Alex, why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and your role?
For sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Alex Neff, and I've been using Slack for a little over 5 years. I'm the Slack Collaboration Administrator at TIBCO, and the first one. We launched Slack globally a little over 2 years ago. My role is kind of interesting too. I'm a part of our IT endpoint management team. And while Slack is my main gig, I also assist with administration of Zoom, Google, and several other collaboration tools and projects. For the Slack side, anything Slack related at TIBCO passes my desk, and I've been a part of building and maintaining almost all of our systems and processes around Slack.
Awesome. Yes, Alex is an absolute star. She even meets with admins from other organizations to help them get started on Slack. So thank you, Alex, so much for being such a great champion. Brendan, over to you. I'd love to hear more about your role. Yeah, over to you.
Hello, I'm Brendan Bellina, and I'm the lead IT solutions architect at UCLA, working in our IT services department. I'm a certified Slack administrator and one of 3 Slack administrators providing support for the campus grid service and UCLA community workspace. We began our journey with the Slack Enterprise Grid in June of 2020, and 3 months later began creating and migrating workspaces for our campus community of over 60,000 people. In the past year, we've created over 150 workspaces and migrated close to 100, and have almost 5,000 active members now using UCLA Slack. As we continue to create workspaces for our courses, labs, campus departments, and campus organizations, as well as migrate free and paid workspaces that are associated with UCLA, of which there are over 2,000, into the UCLA grid, we anticipate continual growth in active Slack usage for the campus. We found it to be a very useful tool in the last year.
Thank you, Brendan. Those are some very impressive numbers. I can't wait, and I hope those of you who are tuned in are also excited to learn a little bit more about how Slack has helped scale some of these efforts. Okay, last but very certainly not least, Sean, would love to hear more about your role.
Yeah, hi. I'm Sean Bugler. I'm the cloud architect for the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. We're a government agency based in the San Francisco Bay Area. We're the transportation planning, financing, and coordinating arm for the 9 counties of the San Francisco Bay Area. Our goal is just to make sure that transit talks well with the region. My job is to take all the different cloud-based services and platforms that we support as an organization and tie them together in a way that makes sense for our internal staff as well as our countless external vendors and partners. I brought Slack to MTC when I started here a little over 3 years ago. Officially, the organization was exclusively an email shop when it came to digital communication. So as you can imagine, it was a pretty transformative effort, and even more so as we transitioned to fully remote work in March of last year. We recently celebrated 90% adoption, which for a government agency that isn't always known for being nimble when it comes to adopting new technologies, we're pretty pleased with ourselves.
Awesome. So for those of you who think that Slack is only for small startups, Sean is here to prove you wrong. And thank you for helping us get around the Bay Area, Sean. Appreciate it. So no doubt the easiest way to get started tailoring Slack to your unique way of working is to use some of our out-of-the-box integrations. And these are super easy to set up and install right off the Slack app directory. Sean, I'd love to hear, what are some of your favorite apps and why?
I think that when we were first rolling out Slack, one of the big challenges for us was, as much as any admin who's rolling out Slack for the first time would like to say like, oh, let's just put everybody in all at once. Let's make them use it. That wasn't the case. And so for us, it was really important to identify apps that were going to be useful personally. So for me, I think there's no greater example of that than Asana. I have to have a to-do list because, unlike my desk at work, I can't just have sticky notes all over my bedroom. It's not going to work. So it's really nice to be able to not only be able to capture to-do items live in the stream of work, like somebody sends me a message, hey, can you check this thing out? I can turn that message into an Asana to-do item right there, 2 clicks. It's awesome. But it's also really nice because you've got that dedicated Asana app where you can get updates on comments that people have made to items that you've assigned them. You can get status updates when dependencies have been cleared. I think Asana is a really, really great tool in that respect. Another one that I'm a really big fan of is an oldie but a goodie, Outlook Calendar. I know that there's, Microsoft on Slack, but it's a really, really nice thing to have. You can get a quick snapshot of exactly what's happening in your day. So you can go to the Outlook Calendar app. You can see what's coming up. You can see here in the screenshot. If there's a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting, there's a one-click button that's just going to open the app right from Slack. So you don't have to break away from whatever you're doing. Open up your Outlook app, which is going to take forever, open up a web browser and go to the calendar space. You can just jump into the meeting. It's really nice.
Awesome. Yeah, I would say for anyone who's listening who doesn't have apps or integration set up yet, some of our calendaring ones are a great place to start because you're going to see that value right away and the time save right away. And it's very easy to set up directly out of the box. On the topic of calendar integrations, Alex, I know you use Google Calendar. Can you tell us a little bit more about that as well as some of the other apps that you like to use day to day?
Yeah. So Google Calendar and Drive are just some of the essentials. I really would not get to meetings on time without the calendar integration. And that is a true story. I did try turning it off for a couple days, and I was late to almost every single meeting. The Google Drive integration also, like Christina said, makes it super simple to share documents by just updating the permissions directly from Slack. So I don't have to run over to the document in Drive and make sure everybody in that channel or in that DM has access to it.
Yeah, I also I converted direct all the way into Slack for my Google Calendar, and I don't get that annoying notification anymore that wipes my whole screen away from Google Calendar anymore. So that was a really good one. And what are some of your other favorite apps, Alex?
Yeah, continuing that idea of just reducing context switching, I have a few other favorites. When I'm not in a huddle, I'm usually in a Zoom meeting. So the Zoom integration has been a great way to quickly start meetings just directly from Slack. I also really like that I can see who's already joined the meeting before I jump in. Polly has been our go-to for requesting feedback, running daily stand-ups, and even bringing a little fun with their hot takes and trivia. Before Polly, we had no way to run just even a quick poll, let alone daily stand-ups or gathering information in any kind of organized way from Slack. And now our users are sending hundreds of surveys and polls through Polly every month. The Workday app allows in Slack. Before we had it, I would have to find that information from one of our various directories outside of Slack. But I'm also super excited for Slack Atlas to just see all of that information directly in the profile, including the full org chart. I'm a super visual person, so just being able to see everything laid out helps me see where somebody fits into the organization. And finally, we also use Jira Service Desk for our internal ticketing system. So Help was the perfect match to connect to Slack. Before we had Help, our users had to jump out of Slack and access our help desk site to create a ticket. And then our agents had to manually create tickets from messages they received in Slack. But now both our users and agents have the power to create tickets just directly from Slack, and it's been a life changer.
Oh, I love to hear that. And I love that you called out that you're a visual person. So am I, which is why I think I love a lot of these integrations, because as you can see here, it's very clear where these notifications are coming from. I think it's super sleek and easy to navigate. So again, if folks on the line don't have one set up, try it. It's a lot less scary than it might sound. Shifting a little bit more to sort of industry or role specific apps and integrations, Sean, since you're at a government agency, are you using any apps that are specific to that industry or help you stick with some of the regulations that are in place? Oh, Sean, you are on mute.
Oh, there we go. Hi. I said, yes, government, the most exciting industry. Yeah, DocuSign is probably one of the most kind of instrumental apps that we have in Slack when it comes to agency process. I don't think it'll surprise anybody. There's a government agency process is kind of at the heart of everything we do, not just because we love bureaucracy, but because in a lot of different instances, laws or policies dictate that we have to do things in a certain way. So DocuSign just kind of by its very nature has been a powerful tool in that sense. But up until a certain point, DocuSign was very kind of email heavy. So everybody kind of had to have Slack and Outlook open in two different windows. And that wasn't necessarily an ideal world scenario. So when the DocuSign integration with Slack was announced, this changed everything for us, because now staff who are already in Slack interacting with each other and collaborating and communicating, now they're getting real-time updates on actions that they need to take in DocuSign. They're getting real-time updates on items that they've sent that are being signed by the appropriate people, or questions that are being asked about it. That built-in DocuSign home where you can kind of get all those status updates is really nice. But it's also really great for those that have regularly used templates, because you can just call those templates up and send them out to whoever you need to right from Slack.
I love that. And this is a really good example of what I was talking about earlier about sort of taking control of notifications where you want to see them. You can have DocuSign come in through your Slack bot if it's just you who wants to keep track of what the status is. You can also have these notifications go into a channel, so your legal team can keep an eye on. Everyone in the legal team can keep an eye on sort of the status of these different signatures and those documents. Brandon, over to you. As an IT admin, are there any specific apps and integrations that help you out?
Well, at universities like UCLA, academic departments require the flexibility to select the optimum applications that meet their academic needs. Excellence comes from embracing those choices. We have a number of grid-approved apps that work in all workspaces, but we also allow workspace administrators the freedom to approve any apps that are from the Slack app directory. So they have that flexibility. For storage, we use apps for Box, Google Drive, and OneDrive. For calendars, we use both the Outlook and Google Calendar, and we use productivity apps like Trello, Asana, Jira, GitHub, and we heavily use Zoom to facilitate meetings. We use workflows in Slack to capture information for individual requests, and we integrate those often with Google Sheets using the Google Sheets for Workflow Builder feature, so that there's an external log that can be shared outside of Slack. Not everyone who needs to see requests may need to be in the Slack channels that the workflows provide information into. They may want to look at it outside of Slack. We also use ServiceNow for change management within IT services. And eventually, we will have two-way integration with ServiceNow. Currently, we are using Now Actions app ability to communicate to our major incident channel in Slack and add people to that channel as needed when an incident occurs, so that communication about the incident can be captured in Slack rather than through emails. And we have found that to be very beneficial.
I love that. I think, Brendan, you touched on a couple really great points. First of all, the flexibility that admins have here in controlling what apps and integrations they can approve. So you can whitelist apps for your organization that automatically get approved, or you can have admins go in and monitor them you could take it one step further and even set up a workflow for when people want to request an app, have a channel where admins are in there and they can discuss whether or not they want to approve those apps. Another point that you touched on is your awesome sort of next step in your plan for integrating ServiceNow. Your app and integration journey for everyone listening is definitely sort of like, it is a journey. You might start out with just some of the out-of-the-box integrations, and that's a really good place to start, and then slowly build up to creating those custom integrations, which is what Brendan was talking about with ServiceNow. So thank you for sharing that. The beauty of all the apps that we've been mentioning here so far is that you can actually just install them directly off the Slack app directory with just a few clicks and hit the ground running, and they embed right into Slack. You can also add a little bit more customization and have Slack do more of the heavy lifting by building no-code automations with Workflow Builder. So again, I was talking about this earlier, but Workflow Builder is a tool that enables you to automate routine tasks in Slack without writing any code. It really is a drag and drop experience. It's super simple, and it might sound a little bit scary at first, but honestly, I'd recommend just picking a workflow, moving it into Slack, testing it out, and seeing how it goes. Brendan, sticking to you. I know UCLA is using Workflow Builder pretty heavily. Can you tell us a little bit more about what types of workflows you have set up and how you're managing them at scale?
Sure. We encourage the campus community to use Slack to get help and make requests without having to leave Slack and make phone calls or send emails. So if they're in Slack, they can stay in Slack. We have workflows for workspace requests, such as creating, migrating, and deleting workspaces within the grid. Channel requests, such as moving channels between workspaces, making a public channel private, linking channels across multiple workspaces. And we have workflows for submitting feedback, suggestions, and reporting misuse as well. Workflows have been very important because we have a small team of 3 non-dedicated resources providing support for the Slack grid. And we're managing at this point over 5,000 active users in Slack and hundreds of workspaces. Now, the workspace administrators are primarily responsible for supporting their workspaces, but our team provides all the support for the grid overall. Most workflows are in the Slack request channel. We have a Slack help channel and a Slack admins channel, so they're easy to find where these workflows are. And our Slack request channel also has a workflow that executes when someone joins the channel that tells them about the workflows that are available and how to find them in the shortcuts menu.
I love it. Wow, 3 people for 5,000 people. That is incredible. So thank you for everything that you're doing. Glad to hear Workflow Builder is helping you scale out some of these efforts. Yeah, I think that onboarding example is great. Instead of having to remember to send a message to every person that joins the channel, Workflow Builder will do that for you automatically in the back end. And Workflow Builder is definitely extremely helpful when it comes to managing requests. Bonus points for having responses chime into a Google Sheet, which you can now do. Sean, I hear you're using Workflow Builder for internal help channels. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I think that this is easily one of the first use cases you can pull up in Slack when you're trying to think about like an org-wide implementation. So we've got an IT help channel, Help Tech. Our organization is small enough that we don't necessarily have, dedicated resources or people who specialize in any one particular service. So all of our service desk team is in Help Tech. Staff from across the agency can drop in and post, I'm having a problem with this, or this is broken, or my laptop has exploded, something to that effect. And then staff can, if it's something we need to drill into, they can tag it with a particular emoji or React-G. And that'll go and it'll ping them off on the side in a DM to collect more information. We also have a separate React-G using Workflow Builder that will then kick that message out using Zapier to our our email inbox, which is connected to an on-premise ticketing system. When Alex made mention of the challenge of somebody asking for help and how do you document that ticket, when it comes in through Slack, but you've got something like Jira or what have you. Ours is on-premise, so that obviously Slack can technically do on-premise connections. We haven't configured anything to that effect because a lot of us are non-technical. So that workflow builder connection that allows us to just send an email to generate that ticket has been huge. We're working with our benefits team so that staff can have a place to ask questions, which is great. But obviously benefits opens the door to a lot of sensitive questions, things that might lead to follow-up questions that reveal personal information. So allowing the benefits team to tag those messages, send a private DM to the individual to collect that sensitive information in a more contained form is really important. And then, of course, one that happened really recently, our executive AMA channel, which was not inspired, but actually started from a template provided by Slack. The Workflow Builder template gallery has been a huge boon to help staff understand what's possible with Workflow Builder.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing those examples. Yeah, I definitely think help channels, request channels, super good place to start if you don't have anything like that. Again, it just allows everyone to see the types of questions that are coming in. And if you encourage your organization to have a search first mentality, which we always recommend, they can search in that channel for a question and even answer it themselves because the question and answers are right in that channel. Thank you for also highlighting emojis. And I'm going to use my terrible joke that I already told yesterday, and I'm sorry, speakers, but emojis are functional. So they're both fun and functional. I think that's a really big I know, I'm sorry, I said it again. I think that's a really big shift for a lot of people who might not be used to using emojis and are just used to using them via text message. In Slack, they actually do serve a purpose. Other than showing sentiment, they can kick off workflows, they can push messages to other channels. There's a ton of different ways that you can leverage emojis. So yes, loving the variety of use cases here. It's hopefully clear that Workflow Builder is super flexible and can do a lot of different things. Alex, where is your organization at on their Workflow Builder journey?
Yeah, so we've been using Workflow Builder around the company for just about a year now. Right now, it's only open to admins and owners to implement the workflows, but we have users reach out with ideas in our Slack admin channel if they want to try something out in the sandbox and then maybe eventually send it over to production. One of my favorite use cases, though, is actually in my org. Working in IT can often feel like a thankless job, and it's really easy to feel discouraged at times. We wanted to bring more encouragement to the team, so we introduced Kudos into our CIO All channel. Now, anyone in the channel can click on that lightning bolt and choose the Give Some Kudos option to encourage or congratulate a coworker.
I love that. And I think I would just like be first to say thank you, Alex, for everything that you've done. I give you real life kudos. But I think especially now that we're all remote, I think this is so key. To sort of keep that team connection and the culture and that human element in there by showing your gratitude and thanks and making it easy via a workflow. So I love that example. So I know I've alluded to the Champion Network a few times, and all three of you are extremely engaged members of our Global Champion Network. So thank you for being awesome champions. For those of you who are listening that aren't familiar with Slack champions, they are individuals within an organization who have a direct impact on the implementation or day-to-day management of Slack within their organizations. Since we have three of our awesome champs with us today, I have to ask, what are some lessons learned, or what has your experience been with internal enablement or driving internal adoption of apps or integrations or Workflow Builder? Sean, we will start with you.
Yeah, when we rolled out Slack, as I mentioned at the outset, this was something I brought to the agency, and I'm not the CTO. I'm not a senior executive. I'm very much leading from the middle in that sense. And so you don't have that sense of, I'm going to make everybody use this tool. I'm going to say you have to use this tool. I can't even say we're encouraging it because who am I? So it was really important in the early days for us to try and find value that was compelling to the individual, that was going to make them want to use the tool. And so early on, we tried to highlight personal interest channels. One of the very first ones that we threw out there was Leftovers, the Leftovers channel. I don't know, for those of you who don't know, 18 plus months ago, we used to work in these things called offices. And sometimes, I know, sometimes people would bring food, or, a meeting would be catered and there would be food left over in the kitchen or what have you, or, somebody would bake cupcakes. And so it was a great space to say, hey, there's free food on the 7th floor, or, extra coffee on the 8th, or what have you. That single-handedly drove 40% adoption across our agency. It was the biggest driver of adoption early on in Slack. But it was also about trying to kind of speak to the personalities within the agency. So as a government agency that focuses on transit and housing planning, equity is really important to everything we do. So we've got an equity channel. We focus on the challenges that are happening in the Bay Area with housing. So we've got a housing channel. And of course, we're not commuting as much these days, but we're all still trying to stay sane by listening to podcasts. And so we've got a podcast channel. It's been really important to us to try and make Slack compelling from a personal instance, because that's going to help make the tool sticky. And once you've got people there talking about food and podcasts and equity, then at some point everybody looks at each other and says, well, we're all here. We might as well also talk about work. And for those of you that didn't think that would work, it has. It's been such a great transformation for our organization.
I love that. I see it all the time. And it's like you're sharing links into these channels, and you're also making announcements. And that's when people start to realize, wow, this is more than a chat tool. Like, I'm already sharing links to podcasts, and I'm getting announcements for free food. You can apply that to the work life as well. I love that example. Thank you, Sean. Alex, over to you.
Yeah, I'd say an internal champions program is just critical. When we launched globally, we set up a champions program and continue to maintain it to this day. Having all the regions and functional groups represented is a huge part of it, and it helps bring just perspectives from across the company together and gives you allies to help drive that adoption. If you don't have one, I would highly recommend starting one or encouraging your Slack owner to start one.
Yes, I love that. Here at Slack, that's one of the key things that we recommend all of our customers do as a measure of success, because you're creating these champions internally that can help scale out efforts like running enablement sessions, or even going in channel and reminding people to use threads rather than just posting there. So champions can meet and however often they want, and within a channel, and share best practices, and really help the organization out. So Alex, thank you for highlighting that. Brendan, last but not least, would love to hear how you've helped to drive adoption of workflows and apps and integrations.
We knew that there were over 2,000 workspaces created in Slack by people with UCLA email addresses. So there was no question that we would have strong interest if we offered Slack as an enterprise service. Our focus has been on creating a grid environment that encourages our community to create new workspaces in the grid and migrate their existing workspaces into the grid. At the start of our Slack journey, our CTO gave town hall presentations to the campus IT community about Slack, and we reached out to many of our larger administrative departments. We partnered with our academic community, developing UCLA-specific training materials, and academic-focused channels were created to share usage stories. With each quarter, we've seen an increase in the number of instructors using Slack workspaces, and we've used training and help channels within Slack to encourage our over 300 workspace admins to communicate and offer support to each other.
That's awesome. Yes, I think all three of you hit on, and sort of my advice is identifying some sort of pain point for that group that you're trying to roll Slack out with, and then being sure to address that with a specific Slack feature, and then driving value. So it's all about small wins. So yeah, that's some great advice. Thank you, champions. I really appreciate that. All right, so I can't leave you without some just overall Slack tips and tricks from these awesome power users that we have on the line here. Would love to just quickly go around again and get your advice on how to streamline work inside and outside of Slack. So Sean, back to you.
Hello, back to me. Yes.
Radio show.
Managing notifications. I think that's easily one of the single biggest things any person can do in a Slack workspace to improve their quality of life. That little knock sound, as charming as it is, as recognizable and iconic as it has become, doesn't have to spike your blood pressure. It's okay to mute channels. It's totally fine. It's okay to leave channels, for that matter. Just click on your workspace name up at the top, click on preferences, go and manage your notifications. You can turn them all off if you want to, or you can be more surgical. You can mute certain channels and look for just specific keywords. There's so much opportunity there, but yeah, that just good notification hygiene can make a world of difference for just your quality of life and your ability to focus on what matters.
Could not agree more. For a lot of my customers who are so used to email, they have all of their notifications turned on in Slack, and trust me, that is going to drive you crazy so quickly. So do not do that. Go through, leave channels. No one's going to get offended. If there's a channel that you're working on a super important project in, you can actually turn up the notifications in that channel so you're seeing everything that comes in, so you're not missing anything, but then mute other channels. It's so funny that you said that, though. A lot of my friends are messaging me during the Olympics when during the Slack commercials, and they heard the sound. They're like, oh, am I supposed to be working right now? So yeah, definitely manage Alex, what is your advice?
Yeah, use sections. I've changed people's Slack lives with this one. And also just like meet people where they're at. Help your peers get over those hurdles that they have using Slack. Sometimes they're just like one Slack tip away from eliminating that just one thing that infuriates them about Slack. Like the perceived lack of ways to organize channels that I hear about all the time.
Yeah, sections are amazing. I was like a slow adopter to them. For those of you who don't know, sections are like almost like folders that you can create and organize your channels into. So I have ones for announcements or ones just for projects that I'm working on. So definitely look into that. They're awesome. Brendan, what is your advice?
Slack bot, as useful as it is, can be a little like drinking from a fire hose. So try to direct Slack request channels into channels rather than relying on Slackbot for everything. And I'm a big fan of emojis in Slack. Emojis can help to set people at ease and improve the chances that they will communicate freely. So try to maintain a friendly and professional tone and give emoji cookies generously.
I'll say it one more time. Functional. So you can't forget it now. I love that. Thanks, Brendan. And then my advice is I get asked all the time, how do I get started? I would say pick one use case or workflow that you're using day to day and just commit to moving it entirely into Slack. If it's a request flow that's coming in or people are asking for help, move that entirely into Slack and just let it run for a few weeks and you'll start to see the value. And if you commit to it, you're going to get over that initial hurdle. And a lot of people are going to see the value of it. So awesome. Thank you so much to you champions for sharing your tips and tricks. I learned a lot. Hopefully everyone on the line learned a lot as well. If you are listening in and you're interested in taking the next step, there are so many resources we have to help you get started. We've talked today a little bit about Workflow Builder, and you can get more in-depth information by visiting slack.com/workflow-automation. And again, we're going to share this out after, so you'll have all this information. But if you want to hit the ground running with out-of-the-box integrations, be sure to check out the Slack app directory. I recommend just sort of taking a look at all the tools that you're using day to day, your file sharing tools, your video tools, whatever it might be, and then do a quick search in Slack. The app directory is really well organized as well by category, and we have thousands of apps in there. So I recommend setting some of those up and playing around with them. And last but certainly not least, do not do this alone. The best place to start finding answers to your questions is in the Slack Help Center. Our Help Center is amazing. I even look things up in our Help Center all the time. It's constantly being updated, so be sure to check that out. There's a whole section about connecting your tools and automating some of your workflows. With that, I want to thank you all. We made it. Thank you all for joining us today. Hopefully you've learned something new. You're not done with us yet, though. We're gonna open it up for Q&A. So I'm going to open up the Q&A and see what we have coming in here. All right. So we have a question, Daniel is asking, what are sections? So hopefully I explained it a little bit. There are folders that you can set up for your channels. Alex, I know you touched on this. Do you want to get into a little bit more about sections and maybe like how you have your sections set up?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so like you mentioned, sections are kind of like folders that you can organize things into. So if you've used Outlook or Gmail, similar to like the folders in Outlook or the labels in Gmail. And so like I, for example, have like a section of channels at the top that's just like, these are the important channels that I need to be watching all the time. And then towards the bottom, I have a section called Ignore, which are channels that I have to be in just in case somebody needs something in those channels, or I have to kind of be monitoring so that they don't kind of interfere with my work. But then I also organize, like I have specific projects that I'll put sections into. Like if I'm working on like a Slack app, for example, I might have a couple channels that we're working on there. I've seen people do it all sorts of ways, though. It really depends on like your work. So like if you're on a sales team or something, you might have channels per or sections per client that you're working with or customer, and then your like general announcement channels. And then for me in IT, I also have a testing channel.
I love it. Love it. Yeah, sections are also you're not creating them and they're stuck there. You can move your channels within your sections whenever you want and reorganize whenever you want. So you can continue to iterate until you find something that works for you. But when you move those channels into sections, you won't miss any notifications because they're still going to be coming through. So you don't have to worry about that. Thanks, Alex. That was great.
Yeah. One more thing I wanted to mention about sections too is you can do some bulk actions with them too. So if you have like a section you just want to mute everything in, you can do that, and you can hide channels that don't have don't have messages in them, and various tasks like that.
Alex, you just taught me something new. I didn't know you could do bulk actions on them. You really are an amazing
It's been helpful.
Learn something new every day. I love it. So there's a question here, and Sean, I think you might be the person to answer this one because you were talking about notification preferences. That was your advice. How do you help your organization build comfort with and support for asynchronous communication? Slack is wonderful, but having immediate access to everyone within the org leads to the expectation that when someone sends you a message, you should be responding immediately.
The $1 million question. Yeah. So when it comes to trying to, there's so many different levers you can pull in Slack to try and improve notification deluge. Obviously I mentioned like you can control kind of what comes to you, whether it's, with respect to like what notifications even get triggered at all. You can also pause notifications. I think it used to be called Do Not Disturb. Now it's just called pause. Just click on the status profile icon on the top right. You can pause notifications for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, an hour, until tomorrow. You can also set custom notification schedules. So all of these are really great things that you can do to help protect yourself. But I will say that if the question becomes, how do you evangelize that across an agency? One of the biggest things that I can point to is a really, really new feature, scheduled send. This was an enormously requested feature from the very beginning for, not just my organization, but I know a lot of other workspaces. So you can actually schedule a message. You can write it all out, and you can have that message scheduled to send at a more appropriate time. Or if you're like me, have it go out at like 4:15 a.m. so it looks like I'm super diligent. I think that those are really, really great ways to try and not just control and protect yourself, but also to set a great example for others. Targeting and letting executives know that that's an option is a really, really powerful thing you can do. Will they listen? Great question. Stay tuned.
Awesome. I love that. Great. There's another question coming in. What are best practices for app mentioning? This is a good one. When does it become too noisy? I'm going to open it up. Who feels like answering this question?
Sorry, hit me with the question one more time.
Okay. What are best practices for app mentioning? When does it become too noisy?
Oh, let's talk to UCLA about that one. There's so many people in there. Come on.
Well, so we do have some grid-wide policies in place that a fairly small number. We do, as I mentioned, allow our workspace administrators to be responsible, the primary support for their workspaces, and so that means we allow them as much flexibility as possible. But for security and privacy and, yes, to prevent massive overload of notifications to people, we do have some policies in place at the grid level to limit what people can do in terms of sending things to all of a channel or everyone in the workspace. And they are controlled a little bit also. Slack has its own controls on those for what happens when you have more than a certain number of people in a channel. And so we utilize those as well. So every workspace administrator does allow, their own, has to decide what works best for their department though, or their organization. And that kind of flexibility is really necessary for us.
Great. I love that. The flexibility is definitely key. I'd also recommend if you are responsible for sort of managing that channel or Slack at your organization, having a Slack etiquette guide can be really helpful that sort of just talks about the rules of engagement for Slack within your organization, things like when to use @here, @channel. It does change per channel and per organization. So that's just something to think about and to consider. I think, Alex, this might be good for you since you are talking about channels and organization. I feel someone saying, I feel like I have too many Slack channels and can't find what I'm looking for. Help. Once I read the Slack channel, it disappears.
Yeah, that's a great question. I get this all the time, actually, in my role. One thing I would recommend is learning Command K. You can jump straight to channels with that. Another thing is I live in my all in red section. It just shows me exactly what's on red and what I need to pay attention to. Yeah, and the other big thing is just cleanup. A lot of those channels you're in probably can be archived or just left. And, like Sean was saying earlier, leave channels. Archive them when you're done with them. I've been really encouraging my users to do that lately because we did have a lot of just stale channels sitting around that I'm like, why do we still have this? Let's get rid of it. And so don't be afraid to clean up.
Yes, I love it. A little spring cleaning, or what are we going into? Fall, like fall cleaning. I think that's super helpful. I think a lot of people may not know this, but when you archive a channel in Slack, you're not deleting it. All of that information is still living in Slack. You can search through it. It just closes the channel down for active work, but you're not losing that information, which is great. Sean, we have a question directed towards you. Sean mentioned thoughtful rollout process to select correct apps. How long did that take altogether to select and roll out? And do you think it had an impact on the % of employees that ended up adopting?
What a great question. How long did it take? We rolled out Slack 3.5 years ago. I would say it's taken about 3.5 years. And the non-facetious answer is it's an ongoing process. Like you're constantly looking out. One of the coolest things about Slack is how vibrant the ecosystem of apps is. There's constantly new apps coming online that are useful and meaningful, and not just from an org-wide perspective, but on a micro level away. It's okay if an app is only useful to 7 people. I think that one of the biggest mistakes an organization can make is trying to apply this litmus test on what a valuable app is, what a useful app is, on the scale of an entire org, and that's not always going to be the case. Did it have an impact? Absolutely. I think I mentioned at the beginning when we were trying to bring people into Slack, we didn't have everybody. The primary value proposition of Slack, which is that everybody is here, go talk to them, wasn't true in the beginning. And so you had to try and create value that was useful even if you were the only person in the room. And so apps I mentioned like Asana and Outlook have been invaluable from a personal productivity standpoint. DocuSign, valuable from a personal productivity standpoint. The OneDrive and SharePoint integrations, or Google Drive, if you're on the Google side of things, have been super valuable. So yeah, absolutely, because it helped keep people there while everybody else was filling into the room. So, it's like making sure that the bar is open even as the first person is walking in, not when everybody has made it to the party.
Love that analogy. Yeah. I think so so good. I'm like, yeah. Okay, so I see different, organizations have different approaches when it comes to app governance. Some might say like any app that is only pulling information or only sending information out, for example, like those are automatically approved. It's going 2 ways. It takes a little bit more review. So it's all about figuring out what your organization is comfortable with. And Sean, sounds like you guys are doing just that, which is great. Awesome. I think this question is for Brendan. I have recently implemented Slack in my office. About half have immediately adopted and are actively using it. The other half are less enthusiastic. How do you go about getting the latecomers to use it?
Well, it's definitely a challenge. I think there's a lot of people who prefer to continue to work in tools that they're most familiar with, and sometimes in departments, if you have someone who is, well, in our case, people talk at the university from department to department, that lots of people are on committees and talk about different types of tools. And if somebody has an experience with a tool that for whatever reason did not work out well for them, that can actually, hinder other people adopting the tool. So we try to talk about the positives about Slack and what we can do with it. We do not force people to use it. Again, we knew that there was already going to be a lot of people who were going to want to use it. So what we try to do is set the tone in Slack to be friendly, responsive, welcoming. I personally try to be as responsive as possible to any questions that come in to me from the community, because I feel like that's a big difference between Slack and email. Somebody may send in a request by email, and there can be significant delays in them getting a response. But if they start to feel that Slack is a more responsive thing, then they will just start using Slack rather than continuing to do everything in email. Email is great for some things, but I think Slack is a very useful tool. If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So we need to provide multiple tools that each have different strengths, and people will migrate over time to what works best for them.
Love it. The panel is crushing it with the analogies today. I would also say for those who might be sort of lagging to adopt Slack, try to collect some success stories from people who are already using Slack, and maybe interview a few people and say, how has it changed the way you work, and share that back out to the organization to maybe inspire some of those who are slacking, pun intended, behind to join. Okay, we have 2 minutes left. Power round. We have time for one last question. I want to end on a fun note. Any suggestions for apps you use to put some fun on Slack or have fun with coworkers? For example, Donut. I'm going to ask each one of you, and if you don't have an app in mind, maybe a channel that you like to use that's fun. So, Sean, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think that particularly as an organization that was deeply reliant on personal relationships passing in the hallways, Donut has been super valuable for us. For those that don't know, Donut is kind of a pseudo social app in Slack that everybody that's in a specific channel, it pairs people off to meet for a donut or a coffee, so that you can meet different people across an organization. And even for an org as small as ours, we're 360 people. I don't know everybody. And that's been really, really valuable, especially in siloed organizations. It makes a world of difference.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. We have 1 minute. Alex, what's your favorite?
So I mentioned Polly earlier with the hot takes and everything. The Giphy, if you don't have it yet, that's one of our top used apps. And but my favorite is our social yelling channel.
Yes.
We created this, I think, yes. We created it like a while back. I think it was a little bit before the pandemic, maybe right after, but it was right within there. But it's like such a positive place, like, which is funny because people go in there and say, yay, it's Friday, or I haven't had enough coffee yet. And it's just a fun place. And a lot of our executives have actually jumped in and started yelling about things. And when people do have something like they're having a rough day or something, everybody's just so encouraging, and we'll help you get through it. We'll yell together about it.
I love it. Yeah, social yelling is a channel where people can just go in and they type in all caps and just say something to get it off their chest. It's a really good one. Brendan, we're at time, so if you could just maybe in a few words, what is your favorite social app or channel?
Well, I'm just going to plug the Slack Escape Room workflow. So we've used the Slack Escape Room workflow that basically walks people through about a dozen or so Slack tasks that not only familiarize them with what Slack can do, but it's really kind of fun. And at the end, they become, a Slack wizard essentially. So that's something that you can look at. Your Slack rep would know how to give that to you. And we modified it for UCLA specifically, but it's a lot of fun.
Amazing. I didn't even know that existed. I'm learning so much. Thank you. Well, huge round of applause to our panelists. A huge round of applause to our audience for the awesome questions. Thank you for dialing in. Hopefully you learned something new, and be sure to tune into our next webinar. But for now, see you and have a great rest of your week. Bye, everyone.